We're about to dive into one of the most unbelievable survival stories you'll ever hear. And really, it all starts with a single, absolutely impossible number. 2 miles. That's over 10,000 feet. In 1971, a 17-year-old girl fell that entire distance, straight out of a disintegrating airplane and into the heart of the Amazon rainforest. And get this, she had no parachute. She was just plummeting through a violent thunderstorm, still attached to her row of seats, spinning and spinning towards the jungle canopy down below. And somehow, incredibly, she survived. This is the story of Julianne Kopka, the sole survivor of LANSA Flight 508, and her absolutely harrowing journey back to civilization. So you have to be asking, how does a totally routine flight turn into a catastrophe like this? Well, it all kicked off on Christmas Eve 1971, high above the vast, unforgiving Peruvian Amazon. Juliana was on that plane with her mother. They were so excited to join her father, who was this renowned zoologist, for the holidays. Now, there were warnings about severe weather, but the airline, they decided to push on to keep that holiday schedule. And that was a fatal mistake. The plane flew directly into a massive thunderstorm. Passengers were just being tossed around violently before a lightning strike hit a fuel tank. A wing ripped off, and the entire aircraft just came apart at 21,000 feet. Amid all the chaos and the screaming, Julianne remembers her mother saying something incredibly calmly, "Now it's all over." That was the last thing she ever heard her say before she was literally ejected from the plane and blacked out. When Julianne finally woke up 10 hours later, she wasn't in a hospital. She wasn't even near the wreckage. No, she was on the jungle floor, still strapped into her seat, and completely, utterly alone. Her injuries were pretty bad. The rapid depressurization had burst capillaries in her eye. She had a broken collarbone, deep wounds, a bad concussion, and on top of all that, she lost her glasses so she could barely see a thing. But here's the thing about Julianne. She wasn't just any teenager. Her parents were famous zoologists, and she had spent years living with them deep in the Amazon. She knew this place. She was, for all intents and purposes, a jungle girl. Her insane luck of surviving that fall, well, that was just the beginning. Now came the real test, an 11-day battle for survival that was going to push her knowledge and her will to live to the absolute limit. This just gives you a sense of her journey. Her only food was a small bag of candy she managed to find in the wreckage. That's it. For days, she was just facing down her injuries, the constant threat of predators, and this crushing loneliness. But she had one guiding principle. This simple but totally vital piece of advice from her dad. He'd always told her, if you ever get lost in the jungle, find a stream and follow it downstream. That simple rule, it was going to save her life. Of course, the jungle wasn't just a physical challenge. It was a constant biological assault. That open gash on her arm became a breeding ground for insects, and pretty soon it was infested with maggots. So she remembered that her father once traded their dog for something similar, and she took this really drastic step. She actually used gasoline she found in a boat's fuel tank to pour on the wound and force the larvae out of her arm. Unbelievable. So after 9 days of just wading through the jungle, she was weak, she was starving, she was battling a serious infection. And then right as she was about to lose all hope, she saw it. She stumbled upon a small canoe tied up. Now, she was way too weak to try and take it, so instead, she followed this little path uphill to a tiny shelter used by local loggers and just decided to wait. And her gamble paid off. Hours later, the loggers came back. I mean, can you imagine? They were just stunned to find this half-dead girl, covered in mud and insects. They treated her wounds, gave her food, and the next day took her on a 7-hour canoe ride to a small village. Her ordeal was finally over. But her rescue brought a whole new kind of pain. See, the story wasn't just about her survival. It was also about the fate of the other passengers, a really tragic revelation that would haunt her forever. There's one more number in this story, 14. And honestly, it represents the most heartbreaking part of all of this. Yeah, so investigations later showed that at least 14 other people, including Julianne's own mother, also survived that 2-mile fall, but they were either too injured to travel or they followed the conventional advice to stay put. They died right there in the jungle, waiting for a rescue that never came. And this just reveals the immense psychological weight she carries. It wasn't just the trauma of the crash itself, but this profound guilt of being the one who walked out when so many others, including her mom, perished. Her story really forces us to weigh these two powerful forces, right? Was it just pure, impossible luck that she landed just right in the jungle canopy, saving her from the fall? Or was it her unique jungle knowledge that allowed her to survive the 11 brutal days that followed? Ultimately, her survival was this breathtaking combination of both. But it really leaves us with this fascinating question: when you're faced with an absolute catastrophe, how much of our fate is actually determined by what we know? And how much is simply left up to pure chance?